It's Brad Golan with MExit, maximizing the value of your exit. And in our continuing series of discussions, I've got a guest today, Iggy Migalski. Iggy is the CEO of Tundra Process Solutions, and he has been a serial entrepreneur, and then over the last, how many years has it been?
I have now been in Calgary for 12 years.
When we talk about business owners and their considerations around exiting, they really need to think in advance about their businesses. They really need to think about, how do I maximize the value or implied value of my business so that when they're ready to go to that next level or engage, partner, or potentially look at someone like you acquiring them, what kind of things would you advise? What kind of things do you think it's really critical for them to be aware of and think of as they're trying to build that value to be able to have that conversation with you?
That's a great question, Brad, and thanks for having me here today. You know, I've actually never sold a business. I've been a part of about a dozen startups and a dozen acquisitions. But as you go down the path of buying business, you definitely learn about what is important in selling a business because you're just on the other side of the table. And I think that one of the main things that people often forget is really being able to articulate clearly what it is that their business does and what makes it special and unique. If it's your vision to be a company that maximizes shareholder benefit, you know, then everybody should know that. If it's your vision to educate people, then all of your people should know that. And in a lot of companies, that is really not known. And it seems like such a basic, trivial thing, but most people don't know what their company does.
Is really being able to articulate simply, quickly, effectively, not just so you're selling the business in a sense, not so you're just selling it, whether to an investor or someone, but I think there's also the other stakeholder groups that you have to have that clarity of why us.
Exactly. It's understanding your why. And Simon Sinek is a great leader and a great thought leader, and he's got a whole series of lectures and books around finding your why. And I think that's important for every business. And once as a leader you have that, and your people understand what that why is, that will really give you the clarity that you need. And once you've got that figured out, I think the next step is to figure out what is special about you. And what is special about your business. And you know, I don't know how many plumbing companies there are in Calgary, but there's, I'm sure, a lot. Yeah. And I think each one of them does something that they think is special, and that would be a major selling point to a buyer.
What I think I'm hearing when you describe this is in a sense a unique selling proposition, but really it's about differentiating. It's about how are we not just a commodity? How are we not just a me too? What's really special about us?
Absolutely. I think when you look at a lot of companies and ask them what their competitive advantage is, most would say customer service.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if everybody's competitive advantage is customer service, then is that really what makes them special?
Yeah.
And then for some companies, once they really dig deep, they look into their soul and they figure out what it is, sometimes it is that they're the cheapest guy on the block. And that's their competitive advantage. Sometimes it's that they will get to you in the middle of the night when nobody else will. And that's their competitive advantage. And so I think really understanding truly what that competitive advantage is and highlighting it.
Where have you kind of seen the most success in terms of companies approaching this? And you know, you advise a lot of companies. You've advised some of my companies. Where do you think you'd kind of push companies when it comes to kind of figuring out how to create value?
We've had businesses where we've been a leader in each of those ways. So we have a renewables company that sells battery solutions, and our competitive advantage there is a mix of client intimacy and superior technical knowledge. And so for that business, that's where we shine. We have another fabrication business where our advantage is that we're just able to do it faster and cheaper and always on budget, and we've never missed a delivery. And so that's the driver of that business. And in another one of our businesses, it is all about customer intimacy. We know everything about the client, and our goal in that business is just to be their most trusted supplier. So we're never the low price guy. Our technology is comparable to our competition's technology. Our customers just trust us, and that's why they come to us there. And in each of our businesses, I always push all of our leaders to really know what it is that we're selling, what's important in that business, and once you figure that out, just focus on that. If your selling proposition is to have this great customer intimacy, obviously try to be efficient and try to cut costs, right. But put your effort into the customer piece, because that's where your big competitive advantage is.
Do you find is there a generational difference? Do you find that, in some of the stuff you talked about, Simon Sinek, he's been doing a lot of stuff lately on millennials, younger generations, Gen Z, and I've heard him talk a lot about how purpose is kind of lifeblood for them. What's your experience with respect to companies, and is there a generational difference? And does that matter to you when you're looking at what makes a business attractive to acquire?
The generational concept is interesting, and personally it's one that I put no stock in. I don't think that there's really any differences between the generations, except the younger ones just happen to have a cell phone, and the older guys have it too. But when you think about purpose, yep. And there's a lot of broad commentary about young people saying, well, I need a purpose in the work that I work for, and I need to believe in what I'm doing. And, well, who doesn't want that? What 55-year-old guy doesn't or gal doesn't want that, and what 18-year-old doesn't want that? Everybody wants to have a purpose in what they do. And I think there's some stigma around younger people maybe wanting a lot more flexibility in their work and being able to work remotely. I think younger people are a little bit more adaptive to technology, so they've just figured out how to do it. But I talk to anyone who's in their 50s or 60s and ask them if they want flexibility in their work. Of course they do. So I don't think there are actually that many differences, and I think people are pretty consistent generation to generation. So I don't usually think about it that way too much. I think most people want all those things. Most people want purpose. Most people want flexibility. Just some people are maybe used to it a little bit more. But I think everyone wants those things.
But I want to get you to kind of flesh out a little more when you talk about the generational makeup of the company. Kind of what do you look for? Because you kind of warned about if everyone's kind of heavily weighted towards the boomers generation, does that make the business more at risk? Does that make it more worrisome for you as an acquirer? What are your thoughts kind of around that?
The age of the general age of the management team is always a big concern to the buyer. Yeah. And not necessarily just the age, but their intentions. Okay. So, for example, if you have a company that's got a management team of, say, 6 people, what does that group look like? What are their ages? And what are the shareholdings of that group? Are they all shareholders, or is there one person who's the key shareholder? And it also depends on how big the transaction is and how much money these people are getting. Are they getting enough money that now they'll just be able to have a comfortable retirement, but they still need to work a little bit more? Or are they getting a much larger chunk of money where they can all be out the door the next day? And how do you entice them to stay? And of course, you can have contracts that say you must stay for a certain amount of time, but I've never really loved having contracts that tell people that they must stay, because if you have a contract that says that somebody must stay there and they don't want to be there, what's their productivity and what's their buy-in to what you're trying to do? So I think understanding just the makeup of the management team, mm-hmm. both age and intention of what they want to do after this transaction happens, and figuring out if they have the ability to leave wholesale, all of them, what can we do to make sure that they would want to stay?
It's interesting because in the work I've been doing for the last decade plus around organizational transformation, growing companies specifically, one of the things I've found interesting is that developing not just the current leadership, but getting them to develop, not waiting later, but actually to develop the next level of leadership behind them. One of the phrases I used was, every one of you needs to have a second.
Yeah.
And do you look for that kind of capability, or does that make a company more attractive to you when they've kind of created that leadership succession and that kind of path to continuously developing people?
Absolutely, we would always look for that, and we do a lot of these things that we look for in companies that we buy. We try to do internally at our existing companies as well. So in our main company, Tundra, all of our management team, there's 8, and every one of them is expected to have, we call it a 2IC, second in command, and in order to help them do that, we give training allowances and put people in courses and one-on-one coaching or group coaching, and make sure that they are building those business skills. And you do build business skills just by showing up to work.
Right.
But there is a formal training component to it as well.
Yeah.
And so when we look at companies, absolutely, we look at that first level of management and then who's behind them. And so if this group of people, if a few of them decide that they do want to take off and they decide that they want to go do something else, then that's okay, because they've got someone that can step into their shoes.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing is that ideally they've done that. If they haven't done that, then you've got the infrastructure and you're set up that you'll develop that next series of management and that next kind of that ongoing growth and development within their teams if they haven't done that themselves. Does that make a difference in their value to you? So if they haven't done that, do you kind of take off a few points for, we're going to have to help build and evolve your organization because you didn't?
If you're interested in buying that company, you see all the great things that they have, and you give check marks on, oh, they're really good at sales, or they have really great customer service, or they have awesome products, or whatever it is, and you tick all those off. And if they don't have leadership development, then they get a little X in that box. And I don't think that we wouldn't think that, oh, now we have to do it, but we would definitely think, okay, well, there's a risk. And as you're looking to buy a company, you give them check marks for the things that they're good at, and that typically increases the value. And then you give them X's for the things that they're bad at, or for the things that add risk to the transaction, and that usually takes away some of the value.
Let's go back to our target audience is really the business owner who is thinking about, I want to start preparing for my exit. So what are a couple of things on your checklist that you'd say, well, here's some things that you really should think about and get these solid and get these built up, and that's going to make you more attractive to me? What are a few of those things?
I think the biggest thing that business owners need to do is ask themselves why. So I think back earlier into our career of buying businesses, and one of the first ones that we were looking at, this was in 2006, so 14 years ago. And the deal was pretty much done. We were at the signing table and ready to go, and the owner broke down crying at the lawyer's office, saying, I can't do this, I'm going to die if I sell my business. And I actually believe that he really thought that he would, because he loved his business and it was his baby, and if he gave it up, he would lose a big piece of his identity. And then it turned out that he was selling his business because his wife said that she would divorce him if he didn't. So that's a very complex idea that if you keep your business, you'll lose your wife, but if you sell your business, you'll lose your identity and die. So he was in a very, very challenging situation. So really, I think thinking through why you're selling your business and what the plan is throughout the whole transaction, and then after it's done and after you've stayed on. I've seen transactions where the business owner is gone within a few months. Mm-hmm. I've been a part of those. And in those cases, the owner, they clearly wanted to retire. They were done. They had a long career. They had thought about it, and they were finished. And in other cases, the owner what wasn't done growing. They were excited. They just didn't know what to do to grow the company further, and they wanted somebody to come along who had already seen that movie, and that's where we came along, and that partner stuck with us for 15 years.
Right.
So I think, yeah, really digging deep, figuring out why you want to do this, and then what the next steps of your life look like. And as you figure out what those next steps of your life look like, that also helps you to understand how much money you need. And often when you're selling a business, there's a lot of things to consider. There's making sure your employees are taken care of. There's making sure that you're not keeping too much liability. But ultimately, there is a number to consider. There's a purchase price number, yep. And you're getting a check, maybe a really big check, maybe medium-sized or small check.
If you're thinking or preparing for an exit strategy, holistically, what is it you want? Because when you describe that, my mind was kind of going through this, holy cow, I'm not sure quite, I don't remember any business advisory book saying, and by the way, your wife might threaten to divorce you. Yeah, I don't remember that scenario. So you never know what you're going to be facing, but getting clarity on that kind of holistic view of what do you want as the owner. So that's one discussion. The second discussion, though, I find is we need to kind of then evolve the discussion, because if we are going to grow value before the transaction and get the company into growth mode, because to me that's when they're really attractive to you, an acquirer. Because my strategy has always been, okay, if I can get it to this point with my resources, then somebody with more sophistication, more talent, more resources, et cetera, potentially to them, the potential of that, the value of that business could be significantly more to you than it is to me, because you've got more capability. So that's kind of in the back of my mind. But for me to do that, I've got to go back to my company, my team overall, the non-owners, and I need to engage them and give them a why and give them, what are we doing here? Because in the back of my mind is always this worry, okay, I need them to understand and be focused about continuing to build our business before this deal, but I don't want them getting sidetracked on my issues around why this acquisition or this transition is important to me. So how do you see those two kind of different hats that owners wear? And I'm curious to hear about some of your thoughts around how do you deal with the team?
The non-majority shareholder team is very important. And I've seen it go down a couple different ways. I've seen it where the majority owner, or actually in this case it was a sole owner, no consultation whatsoever, and the management team didn't know that it was coming. And so we bought the company, and we came in, and that day everybody found out that this was happening, and the deal was done. So the deal was already signed off, and then it was announced. And in the end, it worked out pretty good, but it was at that point that the owner said, okay, I decided to sell the company. This is why I did it. And the reason was because I wanted to continue to grow the company, and I wasn't sure what next steps to take. So I wanted to bring on some partners that had a little bit more experience. Okay. And in the end, it ended up working out quite well, because it was already a fast-growing company, and then we wanted to keep it growing. Right. And so we did. So you had a management team that was already bought into growing fast, and this was just growing fast, but with a few new people. Yep. So it wasn't that different. In another scenario, the owner had really consulted with all the employees, and not all the employees, the management team, saying, hey, what do you guys want to do? Where do you see your careers going? And that really played into the transaction. And it was sort of the same idea, where everyone was, yeah, we're having fun, we're interested in continuing to grow. And they said, okay, well, what about this kind of an opportunity? And then we went through the opportunity, and the management team was in the know throughout the transaction.
I think what I'm hearing is that basically either way, you've seen both approaches taken, well, multiple approaches, and you can make any of them work in a sense. But it sounds to me like there's a real issue around cultural alignment and recognition of the cultural factor in terms of is there a real alignment and fit between acquirer and the company being acquired? Yeah. For employees, I think, for most business owners are a big concern. Most of the ones I know really do care about their people. So that potential. But it's interesting, if you were advising a business owner, would you recommend one way versus another?
If I was advising a
Keeping
business
secret
owner
versus sharing and engaging them, or
that is a big question. Do you keep this thing a secret right up until the end, or do you let a few people in? And I think from having seen it both ways, my advice would be to keep that group as tight as you possibly can. And it's a delicate balance, because if you do have a really great management team, then they're a sales tool for you to the prospective buyer.
Yeah.
When the buyer is looking at you, and if you have a great VP of sales or a great VP of engineering or operations or whatever your functions are, and that person blows the socks off of the buyer, the price just went up, right? Or at least it's confirming that the price that they're offering is the right price, and they're not going to try to negotiate down. So they can be a great sales tool, but at the same time, once you bring the management team in, they're not focused on the core business anymore. They're now focused on this, and your core business can suffer. They're thinking about the transaction, and often transactions just don't work out. So your company takes a dip in the middle of this whole thing. It doesn't work out, and now you're left rebuilding a little bit.
Because I find with a lot of the business owners we talk to, that is one of their very first questions. That's so top of mind is, okay, how do I approach this? And especially we're talking about maximizing the value. So how do we get a company into growth mode without telling them that the ultimate goal is a deal or an acquisition or a sale or whatever? And it's always it's such a fine line. It's such a razor's edge kind of they have to walk. And to date, I have not figured out a cookie cutter answer to that one. It's so nuanced.